Some stories take years to tell, others take a single moment to break you open. This one, it took me a lifetime to bury, and just one betrayal to bring it all flooding back. My name was supposed to be on that contract. I gave my father every hour, every holiday, every dream, and yet when it came time to pass the torch, he gave it to a man who never lit a single flame. My stepbrother inherited everything I built, and I was left behind. Welcome back to Betrayal HQ, the place where silence is louder than revenge, and every quiet betrayal finds its voice. If this is your first time here, settle in. If you've been overlooked, underestimated, or replaced, this story is for you. Before everything changed, my world was simple, not perfect, but built with purpose. I lived 3 blocks from the shop. Old brick building, gold-lettered sign, and the scent of oil and leather that greeted me like family every morning. I didn't need alarms. My body knew the rhythm. 5 a.m. coffee, black, 5:30 a.m., unlock the gate. By 6 I'd already be under the hood of something, head deep in work while the town still slept. I wasn't rich, but I was rooted. I knew the names of every customer who'd walked in for over 20 years. Knew what they drove, knew when they got married, or divorced, or when their kids turned 16 and needed their first car. My hands were cracked, my back ached more than I let on. But I took pride in what I touched, in what I built. I didn't chase big things. I chased steady. I chased legacy. My father? He was the face of the business, the name on the paperwork, the handshake in the meetings. But me? I was the engine, the one who made sure the lights stayed on and the doors opened every single morning. We didn't always speak much, but we moved like clockwork. When he walked in at 9, I already had the books balanced, orders prepped, and the first 2 customers taken care of. And when he said, "One day this will be yours," I didn't doubt it, not because I expected it, but because I earned it. There was peace in that life, a quiet kind of respect. I wasn't chasing attention. I wasn't looking for applause. I just wanted to carry forward what he started, and leave it stronger than I found it. That's the world I lived in, until one smile, one folder, and one name changed everything. She came into our lives with perfume that smelled like money, and a presence that filled the room before she even spoke. My stepmother, Elise. My father met her at some networking dinner. She was dressed in pearls, manners, and ambition. Said she ran her own design firm. I wasn't sure if that was true, but I knew this much. She had a voice like velvet, and eyes that calculated like a banker's. When she walked into the shop for the first time, she looked around like it was quaint. Not home, not history, just old. She smiled at me, but it never quite reached her eyes, and when she leaned over to whisper something into my father's ear, he laughed a little too loud, like he was trying to impress someone in his own building. That was the first shift. Small, almost nothing, but I felt it. Then came Jordan, her son, my stepbrother, the kind of man who walked into a room with cologne stronger than his resume. Smooth, well-dressed, good posture, but when you asked him to find the invoice folder, he stared like you'd just spoken another language. He shook my hand firmly, called me boss the first day, but he never came in before 9, and somehow, he was always out meeting clients by 2. The mechanics didn't trust him. The old accountant, Marlene, said she once caught him using the company card for cufflinks. I let it slide, because my father, he looked happy, happier than I'd seen him in years. I figured, maybe that's worth more than my frustration. Maybe I could just stay in my lane, do my job, and let Jordan pretend. But things kept shifting. One day, Jordan suggested streamlining staff. That was the same week we let go of Rob, our head technician who'd worked with us for 17 years. I confronted my father. He said, "We have to modernize." I wanted to say, what's modern about forgetting loyalty? But I didn't. Instead, I nodded and went back to the floor, where real work still made sense. Elise started attending meetings, always bringing branded notebooks, always ending the conversation with, "Just a suggestion." But somehow, those suggestions turned into decisions, and those decisions started sounding a lot like what Jordan wanted. The office used to feel like a second home. Suddenly it felt like a stage, and I was the quiet extra in a story I'd helped write, now watching strangers steal the scene. It was never about the money, not the cars, not the title. What I wanted was my father's legacy, and for him to look at me the way he used to, like he was proud to call me his son. I grew up in his shadow, but I never resented it. In fact, I chased it. As a kid, I used to watch the way people lit up when my father shook their hand. He didn't say much, but when he did, it mattered. That's who I wanted to become. Not just a man who worked hard, but a man whose word carried weight. There was a time he'd put his hand on my shoulder in front of clients and say, "My boy's sharper than me." I lived off that sentence for years. That was my currency, my reward. Not raises, not plaques, just that quiet look from him, the one that said, "You're next." I never needed applause. I just needed to know I was part of something worth carrying forward. That what he built wouldn't fall into the hands of someone who wore ties but never tightened bolts. And beyond that, I needed peace. I'd been with the same woman, Claire, since we were both 20. She knew that business was my second heartbeat. Every missed dinner, every late night she understood, because she believed in what we were building. in what I was trying to preserve. We didn't have kids, not for lack of trying, but life had other plans. So in a way, that business was my child, the legacy I'd leave behind when the lights went out for good. And now I could feel it slipping. Not all at once, but like a leak in a boat, small, silent, but steady. And the worst part? He saw it too, my father. He saw it and said nothing. At first it was just little things. A few changes to the payroll process. Jordan said he was modernizing the system. One or two longtime vendors replaced by flashier names. I raised an eyebrow, but not a word. Then my father started arriving later. Not drastically, just enough to be noticed. 9 booth became 10. Staff meetings started without me. One day I walked into the conference room and found Elise sitting in his chair. She smiled and said, "Oh, we just got started." I was 5 minutes early. Jordan began signing memos I used to write. His name was on internal emails, schedules, even proposals. He hadn't earned it, but he wore it like he had. No one said anything outright, but I could feel it. The air in the office had changed. People who once looked to me now waited for Jordan's approval. One afternoon, I found a company credit card charge, $742 at a steakhouse. I never got invited to that dinner, but I saw the picture later. Jordan, Elise, my father, laughing like they just closed $1 million deal. And me? I was under a Chevy in Bay 3, elbow deep in a fuel leak. I told myself it didn't matter, that the work spoke louder than politics. But then my key card stopped working on the executive floor. Security said they'd updated access. I laughed, said I'd get it fixed. But deep down, something sharp twisted inside me. I wasn't being left out by accident. I was being faded out deliberately. I started keeping my own notes, my own backup of files. I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing. I didn't have proof of betrayal, not yet, but I knew what distance felt like, and I'd never felt this far from the man who once called me his right hand. It happened on a Tuesday, one of those slow afternoons when the phones barely rang and the air felt thick with pause. Elise had asked for a casual family lunch at the office, said it would be good for morale. I showed up in my work shirt, still smelling faintly of motor oil and sweat. Jordan came in wearing a slim gray suit and sunglasses, indoors. The staff gathered. Dad stood at the head of the table, holding a glass of wine. There was laughter, smiles, a warmth I wasn't part of. I thought he was going to retire, that maybe this was the moment he'd hand it over to me, in front of everyone, like he always said he would. My palms itched with nerves. I sat up straighter when he cleared his throat. "It's time," he said. "Time for the next generation to take the lead." My heart kicked once, then waited. He turned, smiled, and handed Jordan a black leather folder. "This company needs energy, vision, a fresh face," he said. People clapped, not because they meant it, but because they didn't know what else to do. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at the folder. The one I'd seen in my dreams for years. The one that was supposed to have my fingerprints on it. Elise gave me a quick glance, and a smile so polite it burned. "Jordan," he said nothing, just nodded like he'd earned it. I don't remember much after that. Just the sound of plastic chairs scraping the tile, and my father's voice laughing at something Jordan said while I sat right there. Not fired, not dismissed, just deleted. Betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hands you a glass of champagne and toasts to your replacement while you're still in the room. I sat in my truck, keys still in the ignition, engine off. The air inside felt heavier than the sky outside. My hands were still stained with the same grease I'd worn since I was a teenager. The same hands that had opened that shop every morning, now curled around a steering wheel like it was the only thing I could still hold on to. I stared through the windshield, watching Elise laugh in the lobby, watching Jordan shake hands like a politician, watching my father smile like nothing was broken. I wanted to open the door, walk back in, ask him, what changed? When did I stop being enough? I kept hearing the claps, that moment when they announced it, and no one looked at me. Not with surprise, not with sympathy, just silence. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was something worse, empty. I thought about Claire, thought about the years she stood by me through every skipped dinner, every missed weekend. I had promised her it would all be worth it one day, that we were building something. Now I didn't know what I was building anymore, or who I was building it for. That was the first time I ever questioned if I even belonged there anymore. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because the story I thought I was writing had been handed to someone else, with my name crossed out of the credits. I didn't drive away that day. I just sat there, in the silence. That she convinced him I was a risk, a threat, a name to leave off. I walked to my car with a slow, practiced calm, sat down, closed the door, and that's when I saw it on the back seat. A box, sealed, no label. I opened it. Inside, a bundle of old photos, me and him, the shop in its first year, Mom on the porch smiling with paint on her shirt, and a note. Just 4 words in his handwriting. Protect what matters most. I stared at those words like they were oxygen, and that's when it hit me. She thought she won, but she didn't know what he left me. She thought she buried me with the will. But I had something stronger, his trust, his truth, his voice. And now, I was done grieving. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to post online. I was going to investigate, because if she changed the will, if she lied to him while I stood silent, then she just made the worst mistake of her life. She made an honest man angry, and there's nothing more dangerous than a son with nothing to lose and everything to prove. I didn't yell. I didn't storm into her house or demand explanations. I didn't even text back when she sent that fake sympathy message the next morning. He really loved you. He just didn't know how to say it. No, I said nothing. Because when you know someone has stolen from you, the worst thing you can do is let them know you've noticed. So I smiled, replied, "Thanks." I'm sure he did. Then I got to work. I called my father's old lawyer, the one who helped him set up the business 2 decades ago. He hadn't heard from him in over a year. He sounded surprised when I mentioned Clarice. Even more surprised when I told him she'd handled the final will. Next, I visited the bank. Quiet, alone, no appointment. I asked if there were any safe deposit boxes under my father's name. The teller hesitated, asked for ID. Then she returned with a manager. There was one, still active. Inside, a voice memo stored on a USB drive, a handwritten note in my father's shaky script, and a timeline of account changes Clarice never thought I'd find. He knew something wasn't right, and he didn't know who to trust. So he left breadcrumbs for the only person he hoped would follow them, me. So I kept following. I went back to the office and pulled old tax records, dates, signatures, beneficiaries. The handwriting on the new will, too smooth, too perfect. I knew my father's script. I knew the way his G's looped and how his R's leaned when he was tired. This wasn't him. I found his medical records, compared the timeline, the date the new will was signed. He was sedated. I didn't need drama. I didn't need confrontation. I needed proof. And slowly, silently, I was collecting it. Every bank withdrawal, every document change, every whisper she thought would vanish. I built a case the same way he built the business, brick by brick, quietly, carefully. And while she toasted to her win, I was drafting my opening argument. Because what she didn't understand is that silence isn't weakness. It's a weapon, and I'd spent my whole life learning how to use it. I didn't slam doors. I didn't make a scene. That's not how men like my father raise sons like me. Instead, I adjusted. I stopped paying the business utilities. Quietly. The lights at the shop went out on a Thursday. The staff called her. She blamed a billing error. I called the city and canceled the service in my name. No warning. No announcement. Just a click. She didn't notice that the web domain, holtsolutions.com, was still registered under my profile. I logged in, froze it, updated the contact information to a blank. Then I pulled the business EIN history, cross-referenced it with the IRS. The original tax records, still tied to me, still showing my ownership. She had skipped a step. I made a single call to a forensic accountant, sent the voice memo, sent the handwritten note, sent the timeline. He didn't say much, just "You've got something here, something real." She was playing checkers. I was moving chess pieces that hadn't been touched in years. I started recording every phone call, every voicemail, every accidental admission. "Your dad said I could handle it all. You don't need to be involved anymore. It's over." He trusted me more than anyone else in the end. I saved every word, dated them, logged them. She didn't notice when her name stopped appearing in vendor systems, or when I contacted his oldest clients and let them know the business might be restructuring soon. I didn't threaten. I didn't accuse. I documented. And then, one Monday morning, I had the papers served, right to her doorstep. No warning, no heads up, just a knock. She opened the door, found a stranger in a suit, an envelope in his hand. Her name printed on it in bold. Inside, a lawsuit, forgery of legal documents, undue influence over a vulnerable adult, fraudulent inheritance claims, backed by timestamps, recordings, medical records, and a note in my father's own handwriting. She called me later that day. 6 times. I didn't answer. The 7th time, she left a message. Her voice wasn't smug anymore. It shook. "Why are you doing this?" I sat in my truck. Same place I sat the day I got locked out. Played that message back one more time, then smiled. Because for the first time in this whole story, she was finally on the outside, and I was just getting started. I sat in my living room that night. Lights off, just the soft glow of the TV screen playing something I wasn't watching. Legal documents scattered across the coffee table, receipts, medical reports, voice transcripts, truth. But I couldn't help asking myself, was it worth it? Maybe I should have walked away. Maybe I should have let them have it all. The house, the business, the name. Maybe legacy isn't something you fight for. Maybe it's something you surrender to silence. I kept thinking about my dad's last months, how I wasn't there, how she made sure of that. But still, I wasn't. Would he be proud of this, of what I'm doing? Or would he shake his head and say, "Let it go, son. Let them take the things. You keep the peace." I'd been raised on that kind of thinking. Stoicism, stillness. Real men don't chase what's already gone. But then, what's left when you let them take everything? What's left when the people who never held the weight get to carry the reward? I looked at my hands. Rough, calloused. The same hands that wired the first ceiling fan in Dad's shop. The same hands that painted Mom's front porch the summer before she passed. These hands had built something, carried something, buried something, but now they were carrying a different kind of weight. Not hammers, not wrenches, but evidence, proof, revenge, and it was heavy in a different way. I asked myself, was I becoming her? Was I letting bitterness rot what little peace I had left? Because the truth is, winning doesn't always feel like justice. Sometimes, it just feels like a colder kind of grief. But then I remembered the note. My father's handwriting. 4 words, protect what matters most. And I realized, this isn't about revenge. This is about restoration, about truth, about making sure the story ends the way it started, with honor. So I leaned back, took a breath, and I whispered to myself, finish it, not for you, for him. Every con artist has one fatal flaw. They start to believe their own performance. Clarice was no different. She'd moved through my father's final months like a shadow, unseen, unbothered, untouchable. But greed has a habit of making even the smartest thieves sloppy. It was the gala, a charity event she threw in honor of my late husband. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't need to be. I had a friend on the inside, an old vendor who used to work with my father before Clarice rewrote all the contracts. He sent me a video, just 27 seconds long. Clarice, standing under a chandelier, champagne in hand, talking too loud, laughing too hard, surrounded by donors who didn't know the history behind the legacy they were clapping for. And then she said it, clear as day, I'm just glad everything's in my name now. He left it all to me, and not a dime to that boy who kept hanging around like a bad memory. The crowd chuckled politely. They didn't know who she meant, but I did. That boy was me. And what she didn't know was that the mic on her podium was still hot, live-streamed, audio recorded, archived. Later that week, she tried to purchase a luxury SUV, cash, straight from the business account. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already filed a hold on those funds through my legal petition. The payment bounced. The dealership flagged it. Her name hit a compliance watch list. Then she called the accountant, panicking, and that call was recorded too. I thought you said it was handled, she shouted. He was supposed to be out of the picture. That was the mistake. Not the insult, not the car, not the event. It was the arrogance, the belief that she'd already won, the belief that I'd rolled over and disappeared like she'd written me out of reality. But now, the recordings, the financial trail, the forged signatures, it was all stacking up, and her champagne toast, that was the match. The one that lit the courtroom on fire. She gave me what I couldn't find in all the bank statements and deposit boxes, intention. And now, her performance was about to end. Because once the mask slips, once the world sees what's really behind the smile, no amount of charm can put the pieces back together. When the courtroom doors opened, she walked in like it was an inconvenience. Like we were wasting her time. Expensive heels, hair pinned high, not a crack in her performance. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I had already seen what mattered. Every forged line, every shady bank transfer, every voice recording played frame by frame. The judge called it a pattern of undue influence and deceptive financial control over a cognitively declining individual. But I didn't need the legal terms. I already knew what it was. It was theft, of legacy, of memory, of blood. The forensic handwriting expert confirmed what I suspected. The signature on the new will wasn't authentic. It matched Clarice's writing in subtle but damning ways. The pressure points, the loops, the unnatural slant. My father's nurse testified next. He told me, I think she's changing things behind my back. But I don't want to fight. I'm tired. She said he'd started hiding cash in his sock drawer. That she once found him trying to scribble a note while Clarice was out getting groceries. And then, they played the voice memo. His voice, fragile, raspy, but clear. If anything happens, don't let her take it all. Check the deposit box. My son knows what to do. Those 17 seconds changed everything. Clarice went pale. Her fingers fidgeted with her bracelet. No more smiles. No more clever comebacks. And then came the ruling. The will? Invalidated. The estate? Frozen and reordered. The business? Transferred back to my control. The accounts? Audited. Reassigned. Her lawyer whispered to her, but her face said it all. She'd been dethroned by the one thing she underestimated. My silence. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smirk. I stood, buttoned my jacket, nodded to the judge, and walked out. 2 weeks later, she came home to find a notice taped to the front door. Formal, stamped, final, eviction. The locks were changed that afternoon. The same house she said I didn't belong in, now no longer belonged to her. No confrontation, no screaming match, just a quiet storm, one she never heard coming until it was already too late. Because justice isn't loud. Sometimes it walks in dressed like paperwork. Sometimes it comes in the form of an email, a ruling, a name, restored. And in that silence, I found my peace. The day after the eviction, Clarice didn't call, didn't show up. But people around us, they started talking. Vendors who once stopped answering my calls, they emailed back, apologizing for the confusion. Old clients who had been rerouted quietly reached out, asking if I was officially back in charge. Everyone suddenly remembered my name. Funny how quickly people change sides once the power shifts. Some were shocked, said they had no idea what was going on. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they just didn't want to. Others, like my Aunt Sheila, just nodded and said, "I knew you'd find a way." Clarice didn't make a public scene. That wasn't her style, but she made her statement in the only way she knew how. Silence. No apology, no denial. She just vanished. And honestly, that told me everything. Because sometimes the loudest scream isn't a slap or a lawsuit. It's the look in someone's eyes when they realize they lost control. That all the strings they pulled snapped. That the quiet one, the one they erased, belittled, underestimated, never stopped remembering. I walked through the front door of my father's house a week later. Same scent, same creaky floorboard by the hallway. I placed the handwritten note back where I found it, inside a small wooden box above the mantel. I stood in his office, alone, in the chair where she once sat giving orders. And I whispered, "We're good now, Dad." Because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming what was mine. Quietly, fully, completely. No gloating, no press release, no show, just a name, restored, and for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. I don't think you go through something like this and come out the same. I'm not the man I was when this started. I used to think silence meant strength, because I didn't want to be like them, the loud ones, the cruel ones, the ones who made noise just to drown out the truth. But I've learned that silence can also be sharp. It cuts, it isolates, and it can turn a loyal son into a stranger in his own story. There was a time when all I wanted was a thank you, a nod, a seat at the table I helped build. But now, I don't need permission to take up space. I walk into my father's office every morning, open the blinds, turn on the lights, and sit behind the desk he once ruled from. But I don't sit the same way he did. I don't just build the business. I protect the memory. I've put his name back where it belongs, on the wall, on the documents, on the front gate. But I added mine too. Not as a son, as a man who earned it. Do I still wish it had ended differently? Of course. I wish he'd had the strength to stand up to her. I wish I hadn't stayed quiet for so long. I wish I could have looked him in the eyes one last time and said, "I kept my promise." But grief has its own language, and sometimes the only closure you get is becoming the man you were meant to be, with or without the apology. I don't hate her. She taught me more than she ever intended. She taught me that some people don't want a family. They want control. That not every smile is safe. That loyalty without boundaries becomes a weapon against yourself. And she taught me the most powerful lesson of all. They can erase your name from paper, but not from memory, not from blood, not from truth. I'm quieter now, a little colder maybe, a little more careful about who I let close. But I'm also clear, and if peace means choosing myself, even when it's lonely, then so be it. Because I didn't fight for money, I fought for meaning, and I won. There's one thing they couldn't take. It wasn't in the will. It wasn't tied to a bank account. It didn't need a lawyer's signature. It was a key, old, rusted around the edges, worn teeth, a tiny chip on the handle where my father once dropped it while fixing the front door in the rain. That key opened the side gate to our shop. The gate we used before the business was official, before we had clients, before we had contracts, before we had her. He handed it to me when I was 16, said, "If you've got this, you're part of it." I kept it on my key ring. Even after she locked me out, even after the name was changed. I almost threw it away once. The night I sat in the truck outside the locked office, humiliated and forgotten. I held it between my fingers and thought, what's the point of a key that doesn't open anything anymore? But I didn't toss it. I tucked it in my glove box, and I left it there. Until the day the judge handed the business back to me. I went straight to that gate. Same rust, same squeak, same memory. I took that old key out, slid it into the lock, and it turned. Smooth, effortless. Like time never passed. Like the place remembered me even if he didn't. I stood there, holding it in my hand, realizing this was never about money. It was about access, legacy, memory. They changed the documents, but not the metal. Not the weight of that small, quiet thing still choosing to open for me. So now I keep it in my desk drawer, not for utility, for remembrance. Because that key, it's everything she couldn't erase. It's the proof that no matter how deep betrayal cuts, some locks were always meant for your hands, and some names were never meant to be written out. Justice came quiet, slow, clean. She lost everything she stole, and I didn't have to touch a single thing. I walked away with the truth, the name, and the key, and I thought that was the end. But what I didn't know was she wasn't done yet. Not entirely, because some people don't know how to lose, and sometimes the real storm doesn't start when you strike. It starts when they realize you still have something left to lose. Sometimes I still wonder, was I wrong to protect what was mine? Not out of rage, not out of revenge, but out of something deeper, loyalty. Blood, the belief that a man's name should mean something, that silence shouldn't be mistaken for surrender. Some people said I should have walked away. Let her have it. It's just stuff, they said. But it wasn't just stuff. It was a life, a story, a legacy, a father's last breath left in my hands. So I ask you, what would you have done If someone rewrote your story and signed it without your permission, would you have let them publish the lie? Or would you have written your name back in quietly, boldly, without apology? I didn't do this for money. I did it because when a man gives you everything he has, and someone tries to bury it with a smile, you don't let them walk away with the shovel. Not out of anger, out of duty. So no, I don't regret it. And if that makes me cold, then maybe cold is what you become when you've been left out in it for too long. They didn't take everything. They just lit the match and assumed I'd burn with it. But I didn't scream. I didn't run. I stood still. I waited. I listened. And when the time came, they handed me the rope, and I let them tie the knot themselves. You didn't hear her side. You won't. You didn't hear the lawyer explain it in court, or the nurse recount what she saw. You didn't need to. This was never about them. This was about what I saw, what I lived, what I carried in silence while everyone else clapped for the performance she was putting on. You only heard my voice, because for a long time, it was the only one that remembered the truth. And now that it's been spoken, I don't need anyone else's version. Not hers, not theirs, not even yours. I lived it, and that is enough. So now I ask you, what would you have done? If someone rewrote your story, tore out your name, claimed your blood, silenced your voice, would you have walked away? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have done what I did? Waited, watched, let them get comfortable, then reminded them that the son they buried still knew where the truth was kept? Would you have fought back, or just faded out like they wanted? What do you do when the people you once fed turn and starve you out of your own home? Tell me, because maybe I'm not the only one who's had to rebuild after being erased. Maybe you've lived it too. And if so, then this story wasn't just mine, it was ours.